presentation of the South Carolina Educational Television Network. Major funding for the Voices and Visions series is provided by the National Endowment for the Humanities
Annenberg Media.
Additional series funding is provided by the National Endowment for the Arts and the Arthur Vining Davis Foundations. Special funding for this program is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the Lannan Foundation, the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation, and the New Jersey Committee for the Humanities.
Dream. We dreamed, each separately, we two, of love and of desire that fused in the night, in the distance, over the meadows, by day impossible. The city disappeared when we arrived. A dream, a little false, toward which now we stand and stare transfixed. All at once, in the east, rising, all white. All art is sensual. Listen. Never mind, don't try to work it out. Listen to it, let it come to you. Sit back, relax, and let the thing spray in your face.
Could you direct me to the Grand Central Station? Who are you?
Gotta get a cab right away, I'm gonna be late.
I'm looking for the wallet.
Hi, open up a dozen. What you trying to do, charge your batteries? Make it 2. Easy, girl, it'll blow a fuse if you keep that up. Why don't you bring me a good letter, one with lots of money in it? I can make use of it. Attaboy, attaboy.
What makes Williams such a great poet is that he does speak about and to ordinary people.
Why is any great poet a great poet? A great poet is one who makes a difference to the art of poetry. I think it's as simple as that. And he made more difference to American poetry than anyone other than Walt Whitman.
In Williams's autobiography, in its foreword, he tips us off as to his own nature, the role of Eros in his writing, the role of frankness and candor. He says, I am extremely sexual in my desires. I carry them everywhere and at all times. I think that from that arises the drive which empowers us all.
For my part, I was expecting to meet a doctor. I'd heard from Pound that Williams was a baby doctor, a pediatrician. And that I saw immediately was true, because the little house where he lived in Ridge Road, there was a sign, W.C. Williams, M.D., and there was his wife fetched him out of the office to see me when I called, and it was clear that he was an authentic doctor.
And I remember after we'd leave some of those apartment houses, we'd be going down those stairs, and he'd say, did you hear this? Did you hear that? Or we'd get into that car of his, and he'd scribble little words, and I'd say, what is he doing? And at times you'd feel this man is just too much, as we put it these days, too much. Well, he was too much, but he never missed a trick, and all that stuff would come home, either in his head or in pieces of paper, and we know what happened in the evening. It assembled.
I'm an artist, if I am anything at all, and so I take the American language as I find it. No one believes that poetry can exist in his own life, but everything in our lives, if it's sufficiently authentic to our lives and touches us deeply enough, is capable of being organized into a form which can be a poem.
Between 1900 and World War I, which to me is the key period, so let's say when Williams was about 20 years old, you have the invention of not only the airplane and that the automobile really became ubiquitous, you had high-speed trains, you had the Marconi radio, you had, for the first time, the possibility of beaming radio beams around the world. Therefore, you could simultaneously be in two places at once. It just means that the world probably changed more quickly at the beginning of the century, certainly than since. I don't think we've had in the 20th century anything like the kind of acceleration that you have in the years before 1914. Just an amazing period. Now, how does that affect a poet like Williams? The sheer technology is everywhere in his work, beginning with the typewriter. If you compose on the typewriter, you're obviously going to perceive very differently than if you write by hand. The look on the page becomes very, very important. But it's not only the look on the page, it's the whole feel of short, fast movement.
One thing that Williams is trying to do is make the making of poems seem like an American activity. Americans have no problems with spending their lives putting machines together. Detroit was founded on that premise. He saw no reason why you couldn't think of putting poems together in the same way. His habit of typing and retyping is connected with his idea that the poem is a thing made. It is made out of small parts. It is made out of lines. It is made out of phrases. He would retype sometimes the same words 5 or 6 times, the difference being that he broke the lines in different places, and he needed to live with it a while to decide if it was right or not, and he would decide it wasn't right, and he would retype it again with a word that had been at the end of a line moved to the beginning of the next line, and then he would live with that for a while.
It's what you do with the work of art. It's what you put on the canvas and how you put it on that makes the picture. It's how the words fit in. Poems are not made of thought, beautiful thoughts. It's made of words, pigments, put on. Here, there, made, actually.
First of all, you cannot imagine anybody saying that. You cannot imagine it being said. The second thing is you cannot devise a way to say it that sounds plausible.
So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with red...
Wait a minute. So much depends upon a red wheel blow glass with rain, water beside the white chickens.
So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens. So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rain, water beside the white chickens.
So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rain, water beside the white chickens.
So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens.
So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens. Right?
For Williams, the poem sitting on the page is a visual object, and the way it sits on the page does not necessarily tell you anything about how to read it. You particularly don't pause at the ends of the lines to indicate where the lines end, because if you do that, you disrupt it totally. It's not like Shakespeare, shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Thou art more lovely and more temperate, where the lines are the units of thought, and you pause after them. They're the units of utterance. The Williams line is not a unit of utterance. The unit of utterance sometimes runs all the way down the page.
Here was a man who had a kind of energy, really sexual energy, but energy that wasn't always, they didn't know quite how to channel, because one of the main tensions I see in Williams' work is the tension between that sexual energy and desire and fear and safety.
At 10 a.m., the young housewife moves about in negligee behind the wooden walls of her husband's house. I pass solitary in my car. Then again, she comes to the curb to call the iceman, fishman, and stands shy, uncorseted, tucking in stray ends of hair, and I compare her to a fallen leaf. The noiseless wheels of my car rush with a crackling sound over dried leaves as I bow and pass, smiling.
Does that hurt?
Yeah.
How about if I push it down like that? Does that hurt?
No.
All right.
His son is a pretty good writer. I don't think he realizes it. His memoirs of his father are they're masterpieces of exact factual observation, and they bear out an old theory of mine that the best thing that ever happened to Williams was being a medical student, because he was always being taught to observe. That is a medical discipline. The observing of the absolutely commonplace. Looking up the patient's two hands and seeing if they match.
Okay, let's see the other foot.
Is that one okay?
I don't care. I like to see feet. Put this one up.
See the difference?
Not really. I suspect he got a bite, but what bit him, I don't know.
No, it didn't.
My father and I both practiced in the golden age of medicine. I think that in the years I've been practicing, there's been a big change in the character of practice in the small town, the small community. The practice we had in this community, traditionally the doctor went to the home.
Complaint. They call me and I go. It is a frozen road past midnight, a dust of snow caught in the rigid wheel tracks. The door opens. I smile, enter, and shake off the cold. Here is a great woman on her side in the bed. She is sick, perhaps vomiting, perhaps laboring to give birth to a 10th child. Joy, joy. Night is a room darkened for lovers. Through the jalousies, the sun has sent one gold needle. I pick the hair from her eyes and watch her misery with compassion.
He used medicine as a means of getting in contact with a particular kind of population. He could have had another kind of practice. He could have ultimately ended up being a society doctor or a literary doctor with a few literary patients in Manhattan, but he didn't cross that river. He stayed in New Jersey and stayed with the people whose lives he tended, and I think that was part of his life from the very beginning.
There's the young man down the steps of the old office. Around 1917, That's this house before it was altered to accommodate my new offices. And there's the young feller, the new doctor, taken in Philadelphia. This is my mother, Flossie. Another picture taken in Rutherford. I would guess that's her high school graduation picture. Mother and Dad, passport picture taken in, I would guess, 21. There's Dad. In later years, when I've married, there's the great-grandmother Welcome as a younger woman. One of the maids, Elsie, I believe, worked here for a couple of years, and I don't know where she went, back to the orphanage or what. This is this room, Nine Ridge Road, with a stand-up piano, Mom at the keyboard, and Pa Herman in the corner, his rocking chair. He always sat in a rocking chair. The house isn't the same as when I grew up as a kid. We've changed it around since I'm the resident here. But this painting on the wall is something that's been there since the 40s, done by my cousin Ivan. These bedrooms, the master bedroom was here in the corner, and this was Dad's study. It's not furnished as it was when he was alive, but it's, the four walls are still here. The closet's the same. Some of the fixtures have been changed. His desk sat here. On this wall where this bookcase now stands, there was a painting that Mother greatly disliked. It was Marsden Hartley. It was a rather suggestive painting, and she insisted to get rid of it. So they gave it to the museum.
If I, when my wife is sleeping, and the baby and Kathleen are sleeping, and the sun is a flame-white disk in silken mists above shining trees, if I in my north room dance naked, grotesquely before my mirror, waving my shirt round my head and singing softly to myself, I am lonely, lonely. I was born to be lonely. I am best so. If I admire my arms, my face, my shoulders, flanks, buttocks against the yellow drawn shades, who shall say I am not the happy genius of my household?
Now, I'll take you up in the attic, show you where he had a part-time studio for many years. And where he did writing, summer and winter. He had a telephone line rung up here, lined up. The stuff on the walls was his. He put it there. Great variety. You got the record of the stock market from 28 to 32, including the great crash. And incidentally, a poem, and it was where he found it. It reads, I'm just a little prairie flower, growing wilder hour by hour. Nobody ever cultivates me. I'm wild.
Well, Williams was born in the same town in which he lived all his life. In 1883, the actual house where he was born was, I think, a few blocks from Nine Ridge Road, where he later lived and had his practice. But he was there all his life, and this, of course, was one of his great strengths, that he was an intimate part of an authentic American community.
I said he was the quintessential American poet in that his father was English, of old English stock. The mother, born in Puerto Rico, was Basque, part Jewish, of mixed Mediterranean French stock. And so when his parents came to the United States and settled in Rutherford, it was such a mixture of different religious and ethnic groups, and they wanted to be the perfect immigrants. So they joined the Unitarian Church. She dropped her Catholicism. He dropped his Anglicanism. They became charter members of the Unitarian Church, which meant being teetotalers and meant doing all the right things and living in the right kind of house. And the father worked very hard. And the idea was to better yourself, and it's the perfect immigrant experience.
So they came here, came to New York, moved to Rutherford, and here I was born. That's the way it begins. I have one brother. We were both born here.
Now, he went to grade school just there in Rutherford, but then when he was about 14, he and his brother were sent to a very fine school, the Chateau de Lancy, on Lake Geneva in Switzerland. And this was a real opening out for him. Because he saw and experienced all sorts of things that you couldn't find in New Jersey, and many of these things remained with him all of his life. So this was most important, this stage at the school in Switzerland, though it was only 1 year. Then after that, he returned to Rutherford, and one of the best high schools at that time was the Horace Mann School. I think it was up near Columbia or somewhere in New York.
My brother and I commuted from here, taking the Chambers Street ferry, walking up Chambers or Warren Street, taking the 6th or 9th Avenue L, riding up to 116th or 125th Street, and walking up Morningside Heights, and getting to Horace Mann High School in time for the 9 o'clock bell. That was quite a little stunt.
But it paid off, and he's getting a very good English and some Latin, no Greek, education.
I had some very good English teachers at Horace Mann. There was an Uncle Billy Abbott, and I believe that Uncle Billy Abbott was the first one who really led me toward English, toward writing, toward the satisfaction of externalizing my sorrows and distresses. And I think that's the basis for my continued interest in writing.
Waiting. When I'm alone, I am happy. The air is cool. The sky is flecked and splashed and wound with color. The crimson phalloi of the sassafras leaves hang crowded before me, in shoals on the heavy branches. When I reach my doorstep, I am greeted by the happy shrieks of my children, and my heart sinks. I am crushed. Are not my children as dear to me as falling leaves, or must one become stupid to grow older? It seems much as if sorrow had tripped up my heels. Let us see. Let us see. What did I plan to say to her when it should happen to me as it has happened now?
There was, I think, definitely this split in Williams's life. He was devoted to his wife Flossie and his family as the two boys came along, but at the same time there was always this urge to have a little liberation from the climate of middle-class Rutherford. So he struck a kind of compromise. He had his life in Rutherford, but he would also go into New York Friday evenings or weekends, and there he could meet with writers and a lot of artists, people such as the painters Charles Demuth and Marston Hartley and Charles Sheeler. Williams also met the poets who were circled around Others magazine, and they helped him a lot to modernize his poetry, you see, because when he first met them, he was writing Keatsian poetry.
Williams' first book, Poems, 1909, of which only 100 copies were printed, is written in the dominant genteel style of the period. I think it's very important to know what that style was, just to see how rapidly and amazingly Williams moved away from that style. Sweet lady, sure it seems 1,000 years since last you honored me with gentle speech. Yet when forsaking fantasy I reach with memory's index or the stretching tears of minutes wasted counting, as who fears strict chiding reason, lest it should impeach all utterance must, a mighty gaping breach twixt truth and seeming verity appears. Now, you see how contorted the syntax is there? The sentences are so long you lose track of them as I'm reading them out loud. They're all convoluted. They're inverted with clauses coming first and subordinate clauses, the kind of thing Williams never did later. This was the going style in America in 1909.
So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens.
He clearly remade himself, and there were really no examples that Williams could turn to, or at least very few examples. I think the art world became his example out of lack of other examples.
Because Williams was interested in the visual arts, after all, he painted his self-portrait the following year. He did visit the 1913 Armory Show, and he did indeed see Duchamp's scandalous nude descending a staircase. Americans, when they thought about art, if they did indeed think about art at all, thought that art should be instructive, that it should instruct us in the highest ideals and motives of life, that art should somehow reflect the purity of life, and it should have perhaps even a religious message. They were not prepared for the sort of art that they saw at the Armory Show. They didn't understand what they were looking at, and I think they were threatened by what they saw.
Williams describes in his autobiography how he went and just laughed and laughed. Thought it was just wonderful. He saw Cézannes and Picassos and Braques, and he just felt his life had really begun, because he realized here was something that was what he wanted to do, namely to deal with words as words, just as these people were dealing with paint as paint and not representing something.
No ideas but in things is his way of insisting on the particular, the concrete, the palpable, that which is there, and refusing to move from that into abstractions that distance one from that kind of everyday concrete life. And you see that constantly in him, not only as the doctor, who obviously is dealing with life's concreteness, but by his shunning of the blandishments of an abstract kind of mind that is all too proud of itself and all too unwilling to keep itself connected to and rooted in life's everydayness.
The theory is that you can make a poem out of anything. You don't have to have conventionally poetic material. Anything that is felt, and that is felt deeply, or deeply enough, or even that gives amusement, is material for art.
In Williams's day, the writers who couldn't bear America, and that was just about it. They could not stand what they considered to be the insensitivity and the lack of appreciation in America for their work, and they would take off. And so you get people going abroad, such as Gertrude Stein, Hemingway, and Pound, Ezra Pound, whom had become a very good friend of Williams when they were both together at Penn, was living down in Italy. Pound was always writing to Williams and saying, you're wasting your time there in Rutherford. Nothing is happening there. The action in art and poetry is over here. You better come over here. So in 1924, Williams and his wife went to Paris on a rather extended visit, and this was one of the most important trips of his life. He met famous writers such as Hemingway and Gertrude Stein, and he saw Pound again. But what was really important about him was the decision that it led him to. Although he had a very exciting time meeting these people and a lot of French writers, he came, I think, definitely to the conclusion that he was not going to become an émigré writer. He was not going to become an expatriate. He decided that his work and life were in Rutherford, New Jersey, and that was the best place for him to write the kind of American poetry that he wanted to write.
By the road to the contagious hospital, under the surge of the blue, mottled clouds driven from the northeast, a cold wind. Beyond, the waste of broad, muddy fields, brown with dried weeds, standing and fallen. Patches of standing water, the scattering of tall trees. All along the road, the reddish, purplish, forked, upstanding, twiggy stuff of bushes and small trees, with dead, brown leaves under them, leafless vines. Lifeless in appearance, sluggish, dazed spring approaches. They enter the new world naked, cold, uncertain of all, save that they enter. All about them the cold, familiar wind. Now the grass, tomorrow the stiff curl of wild carrot leaf. One by one, objects are defined. It quickens, clarity, outline of leaf. But now the stark dignity of entrance. Still, the profound change has come upon them. Rooted, they grip down and begin to awaken.
Williams' great taste for the new, perhaps even almost a cult of the new, some people would say, is very intimately bound up with his feeling about America as the new world, and with his feeling that the poet's mission is to celebrate the new world, and with his feeling about birth, and with his being a pediatrician and bringing babies into the world, so that he's always dealing with the new. When you are a pediatrician and you're constantly dealing with birth, it cannot be a coincidence that that's what Williams did professionally, and that is so much the subject of his poetry.
In addition to his preoccupation with birth, Williams is preoccupied with despair right from the beginning of his career. I think he felt an extreme psychic isolation and was never quite sure whether everybody else felt that way or not. Maybe they did, but he could only speak for himself. He has many statements to make about the simple, persistent fact of loneliness.
I lie here thinking of you. The stain of love is upon the world, yellow, yellow, yellow. It eats into the leaves, smears with saffron the horned branches that lean heavily against a smooth purple sky. There is no light, only a honey-thick stain that drips from leaf to leaf and limb to limb, spoiling the colors of the whole world. You, far off there, under the wine-red selvage of the West. In your own life, that which touches you, such as your affection for your wife, the woman you happen to be living with, and let's not call her wife, that's pure accident, but the woman who's there with whom you are supposed to be in love and sometimes are, if you address something to her, you feel a little sorry. Probably the poor kid had these things saved for supper, and here you come along and raid it. Or it's practically a rape of the icebox. So I think that's material for a poem. is just to say, I have eaten the plums that were in the icebox and which you were probably saving for breakfast. Forgive me. They were delicious, so sweet and so cold. It actually took place just as it says here. And I think what she wrote was quite as good as this. A little more complex, but quite as good. Well, let's have it then.
Dear Bill, I've made a couple of sandwiches for you. In the icebox, you'll find blueberries, a cup of grapefruit, a glass of cold coffee. On the stove is the teapot with enough tea leaves for you to make tea if you prefer. Just light the gas. Boil the water and put in the tea. Plenty of bread in the bread box and butter and eggs. I didn't know just what to make for you. Several people called up about office hours. See you later. Love, Floss. Please switch off the telephone.
During what you might call the middle period of Williams's works, that is, before he started writing his long poem, Patterson, he was doing a number of things. He was writing the prose of the In-American Grain. He was writing his superb short stories about life in Rutherford. And then also he was writing poetry all the time. I would think that he was writing, I don't know, 4 or 5 poems a week. Now, what these poems were was the mature, corrected Williams. All the Keats is gone. These are the authentic Williams voice speaking in free verse in a broken line, which has a marvelous musical ear. And they are contact poems in the sense that he is making contact with people and his environment and with his thoughts. And they are objectivist poems in the sense that they, for that period, are often focusing, though not always, on the object, something he has seen.
Between walls, the back wings of the hospital, where nothing will grow, lies cinders, in which shine the broken pieces of a green bottle.
Williams had a great influence on younger poets. And the reason to me is very simple, that he was talking a language, an American poetic language, which was fresh to them, new to them, and which inspired and encouraged them to make their own experiments with an American kind of writing. Ginsberg, particularly, found in, although Ginsberg had perhaps originally been reading Whitman, he found in Williams his immediate parent, the person who could help him with his work.
To Elsie, which in some respects is like a predecessor to my own opening line in How I Saw the Best Minds of My Generation Destroyed by Madness, Starving, Hysterical, Mystical, Naked. Here in Elsie, it begins, the pure products of America go crazy. Amazing statement.
To Elsie. The pure products of America go crazy. Mountain folk from Kentucky, or the ribbed north end of Jersey with its isolate lakes and valleys, its deaf mutes, thieves, old names, and promiscuity between devil-may-care men who have taken to railroading out of sheer lust of adventure, and young slatterns bathed in filth from Monday to Saturday, to be tricked out that night with gauds from imaginations which have no peasant traditions to give them character, but flutter and flaunt sheer rags, succumbing without emotion save dumb terror under some hedge of chokecherry or viburnum, which they cannot express, unless it be that marriage, perhaps with a dash of Indian blood, will throw up a girl so desolate, so hemmed round with disease or murder, that she'll be rescued by an agent, reared by the state, and sent out at 15 to work in some hard-pressed house in the suburbs, some doctor's family, some Elsie. Voluptuous water, expressing with broken brain the truth about us, her great ungainly hips and flopping breasts addressed to cheap jewelry and rich young men with fine eyes, as if the earth under our feet were an excrement of some sky, and we degraded prisoners destined to hunger until we eat filth, while the imagination strains after deer going by fields of goldenrod in the stifling heat of September. Somehow it seems to destroy us. It is only an isolate flex that something is given off. No one to witness and adjust. No one to drive the car.
No one to witness and adjust. No one to communicate to. Him imagining the emotional or erotic life of some maid that may have been sent by the state to work in his house. Seeing the poverty of imagination and poverty of means, poverty of communication of his time and ours now, half a century later, where our desire is hidden, whether it's Elsie's or mine or Williams's, where we're used for purposes other than our own health and beauty by the state or by the community and by commerce. What was interesting, he said no one to drive the car. No one to drive the great car of state, or rather than saying the ship of state, really. The car, nobody to drive the car, nobody to manage properly, nobody that knows the road, nobody that knows the way. Maybe the artist somewhat, as Williams here by his compassion was able to penetrate the blanket around our consciousness and point out that we were settling for less than we were born with, as if the earth under our feet were nothing but shit.
For me, the long poem Patterson, which for many people is Williams' great poem, is a definite retreat, and I think it's very ironic that it's the poem that made him famous. The reason I think it made him famous is because whereas the other works were ahead of their time, this one wasn't. Everybody was ready for it. It was not that different from Eliot's long poems and from other people's long poems. And the reason I consider it a retreat is that Williams tried to do something very large, historic, mythic, and it wasn't really his bent.
Patterson is a fulfillment of everything that he did in the 20s and 30s because in order to build that long poem entirely out of sharply registered detail, he had to learn how to register detail sharply. It is a poem that has no particular storyline and no particular plot. It is held together by a locale, a city. It is frequently ambiguous whether that city is wholly a city or whether it is not also a person. He plays back and forth between the city of Paterson, New Jersey, and someone called Dr. Patterson. He begins with what he calls the delineaments of the giants, which is simply giant figures hidden in the landscape.
Patterson lies in the valley under the Passaic Falls, its spent waters forming the outline of his back. He lies on his right side, head near the thunder of the waters filling his dreams. Eternally asleep, his dreams walk about the city, where he persists incognito. Butterflies settle on his stone ear. Immortal, he neither moves nor rouses, and is seldom seen, though he breathes, and the subtleties of his machinations, drawing their substance from the noise of the pouring river, animate 1,000 automatons, who, because they neither know their sources nor the sills of their disappointments, walk outside their bodies aimlessly for the most part, locked and forgot in their desires, unroused.
The problem of writing a poem without a story and also without leading characters was one I think that occupied him for a long, long time. How was he going to do that? How was he going to do a kind of panoramic view of urban American life in space and in time? And do this without sounding like an encyclopedia entry.
This is my plan. 4 sections.
This is from
First,
Patterson.
the archaic persons of the drama.
1 or 2.
I don't know which one it is. I think it's
Third,
Patterson.
the old one.
First book.
Alexander Hamilton working up from St. Croix.
How strange you are, you idiot. Their eyes blown out. For love, for love. Carefully tying, carefully, the modern town.
And the guys
Disembodied
from
roar.
Patterson beat up the guys from Newark.
Gently.
But you,
Breathlessly.
in your white lace dress, the dying swan.
No end. There. For love. There. Farewell. A dream of
For love.
lights hiding in
The
bright
iron
edged
reed
clouds. The
and
moon
stone.
brings silence.
Bow wow, bow wow.
How is he going to structure it? What's it going to be about? And he says, I love this letter. He says, that goddamned, and I mean goddamned poem Patterson has me down. I am burned up to do it, but don't quite know how. I write and destroy, write and destroy. It's all shaped up in outline and intent. The body of the thinking is finished, but the technique, the manner, and the method are unresolvable to date. I flounder and flunk. And he floundered and flunked for about 10 years, and then finally it came to him how to do it. What he came up finally was a sort of, to use the fashionable terminology, a paratactic construction without closure. This means that the poem is collage. Here again, we go back to his friendship with the painters, you know, who in the Cubist paintings would put a piece of this beside a piece of that. What he's collaging are bits of New Jersey history with lyrical passages of his own composition. He actually uses letters, which some of his writer friends, such as Allen Ginsberg and Edward Dahlberg, wrote to him.
Dear Doctor, in spite of the gray secrecy of time and my own self-shuddering doubts in these youthful rainy days, I would like to make my presence in Patterson known to you, and I hope that you will welcome this from me, an unknown young poet, to you, an unknown old poet, who live in the same rusty county of the world. I had written a few letters to him, and then he wrote back that he wanted to include them in Patterson, because I think his phrase was that it was like the voice from the streets or of another generation, from the streets answering him back. And I was obviously thrilled that, say, my interest in a place like this as being a central, sacred place in eternity, or in my eternity in Patterson, that I could actually show him and he would empathize and understand why this place had such beauty, surrounded in the midst of brick factories, with all the detritus and garbage in the middle of the spillway, with the actual birds of the universe chirping in the middle of it, with the buses of the universe driving around it, but it still being a little like a sacred wood in the middle of the city. The humor of that view, he understood. So he understood my letters from that same point of view.
Say it. No ideas but in things. Mr. Patterson has gone away to rest and write. Inside the bus, one sees his thoughts sitting and standing. His thoughts are light and scattered. Who are these people? How complex the mathematics, among whom I see myself in the regularly ordered plate glass of his thoughts, glimmering before shoes and bicycles. They walk incommunicado. The equation is beyond solution, yet its sense is clear. That they may live, his thought is listed in the telephone directory.
No ideas but in things means that there's no God, basically. It's a non-theistic view, that things are themselves. Things are symbols of themselves. And that's very similar to something that Ezra Pound once said. The natural object is always the adequate symbol. What is this symbolic of, actually? It's symbolic of itself, the falls. It's its own water falling over itself.
A wonder, a wonder. Around the falling waters, the Furies hurl. Violence gathers, spins in their heads, summoning them. They begin. The perfections are sharpened. The flower spreads its colored petals wide in the sun, but the tongue of the bee misses them. They sink back into the loam, crying out, You may call it a cry that creeps over them, a shiver as they wilt and disappear. Marriage, come to have a shuddering implication. Crying out or take a lesser satisfaction. A few go to the coast without gain. The language is missing them. They die also incommunicado. The language fails them. They do not know the words or have not the courage to use them. Girls from families that have decayed and taken to the hills, no words. They may look at the tyrant in their minds, and it is foreign to them. They turn their backs and grow faint, but recover. Life is sweet, they say. The language is divorced from their minds. The language. Of asphodel, that greeny flower, I come, my sweet, to sing to you. My heart rouses, thinking to bring you news of something that concerns you and concerns many men. Look at what passes for the news. You will not find it there, but in despised poems. It is difficult to get the news from poems. Yet men die miserably every day for lack of what is found there. Hear me out, for I too am concerned, and every man who wants to die at peace in his bed besides.
Bill died in 1963, and the funeral was held there in Rutherford. There was first a service in the house where the Unitarian minister spent most of his time telling how foolish the citizens of Rutherford had been not to realize what a great poet he was. But what could one expect in a small town?
What about all this writing? Oh, Kiki. Oh, Miss Margaret Jarvis. The back handspring. I clean, clean, clean. Yes. New York, Wrigley's, appendicitis, John Marin, skyscraper soup. Either that or a bullet. Once anything might have happened. You lay relaxed on my knees, starry night, spread out, warm and blind above the hospital. Ah, it is unclean, which is not straight to the mark. In my life, the furniture eats me. The chairs, the floor, the walls, which heard your sobs, drank up my emotion. They which alone know everything and snitched on us in the morning. What to want? Drunk we go forward, surely. Not I. Beds, beds, beds. Elevators, fruit, night tables. Breasts to see, white and blue. To hold in the hand, to nozzle. It is not onion soup. Your sobs soak through the walls, breaking the hospital to pieces. Everything. Windows, chairs, obscenely drunk, spinning. White, blue, orange, hot with our passion. Wild tears, desperate rejoinders. My legs turning slowly end over end in the air. But what would you have? All I said was, there, you see, it is broken. Stockings, shoes, hairpins, your bed. I wrapped myself round you. I watched. You sobbed. You beat your pillow. You tore your hair. You dug your nails into your sides. I was your nightgown. I watched. Clean is he alone after whom stream the broken pieces of the city, flying apart at his approaches. But I merely caress you curiously. 15 years ago, and you still go about the city, they say, patching up sick school children.
Major funding for the Voices and Visions series is provided by the National Endowment for the Humanities.
Annenberg Media.
Additional series funding is provided by the National Endowment for the Arts and the Arthur Vining Davis Foundations. Special funding for this program is provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the Lannan Foundation, the Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation, and the New Jersey Committee for the Humanities.
For information about this and other Annenberg Media programs, call 1-800-LEARNER and visit us at www.learner.org.